Ale, thank you so much for your time, for opening up your studio there in São Paulo. What a pleasure to have you here with all of us.
No, thank you. The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.
Alexandre, I would like to talk with you because we will have the opportunity to present your work here at MOLAA in California, to create a strong dialogue with others Latin American artists. But you are an artist who communicates through a unique alphabet of gesture, I think. And in each gesture in your system, I think functions as a symbol that represent maybe a thought, a feeling, or a lot of questions, right? That definitely you change the boundaries of paintings. And I would like if you can tell us about your creative process, your decision on that, what draws you to this form of expression.
Sure. I think the main thing that kind of permeates my practice is, I don't know, maybe in the more recent years, because for a while I don't have a formal artistic training. I trained as an architect. But I always made stuff that I called stuff, which are the works, but they were always, they had to fit in or in between other things. And then I went to do a postgraduate program, and that was when, for the first time, I had a more solid studio practice. I had time allocated, I had a critical support, I had crits and visiting artists. So I guess for the first time there, I was sort of overexposed to my own practice. And I think a lot of things then start kind of coming to the surface that up to that point weren't parts of the practice. And as the things progressed, and at some point looking back at some of the things, I started realizing how important to me the kind of accommodating the limits of the parameters of a given situation became for the work. So that it is almost as if the limits and the constraints had to be part of the work rather than to be used as a limitation that usually has some sort of bad connotation to it. But I think accommodating that, it became very important, not just for the work and for me, in the sense of giving me a delimitation, a ground where I play with, but also for me to understand where I stand and how I stand towards these limits and towards other situations in my life. So I think there's bringing this reality into the work, to me, is also a way of understanding where I stand and what the reality is. So usually the work doesn't come from a place of demonstration or certainty, but it is built and kind of developed within the dealing with these limitations and my positioning towards things. I think that comes from kind of a very early stage when I started making work that had to be fitting this situation. I think that became part of the work. And also the materials and the gestures I imply, they're very mundane. They don't have like the specialist hands of the artist. There's no maestry in it. They come from like the alphabet of the DIY gestures of drilling and cutting. So everything is pretty much made with the index finger. So if there's a limitation, I think there's something that hopefully makes it a bit more relatable in some sort of familiarity. And that is the same for the materials. You look at the species; they're made out of cheap white MDF boards, that everyone has touched in their lives. Do you know what I mean? It's like cheap cupboards and things like that. So everyone knows the textures, the weights, and I think that's something really interests me. I think I would like to imagine that the work can function in a way as almost like a tuning device for these mundane happenings to be seen outside of the world as well, the work as well, if you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
and I love the idea that at different moment you talk about the process of do it yourself, and I think it's something important for you that you are playing different things and you are trying to put intention, the materials, the colors, right? What
Mhm.
does this method mean in your work?
I would like to think that the work can function, as I said, in a kind of tuning device, awakening device. Awakening might be a bit too loaded to say awakening as if there's like some sort of enlightenment, but it's just like um, because it's all recognizable and attainable to a certain extent. I think I would hope that would create a sort of relation that is a bit closer and easier to. I would like that to touch people that are not necessarily tuned to the artworks, but it can be seen as a thing, as something that is there that you can pick apart, you can understand, there's no trickery, everything's sort of exposed, because I would like to imagine that people can relate to that easily. It doesn't demand a knowledge or a consideration. I would like to imagine that would help for people to possibly have a more horizontal relationship to the pieces they encounter without having to be mediated by any sort of understanding or consideration or license or anything like that. I think that's why this method, this way of interacting, is important to me. Equally with the materials.
Mhm. And Alex, you spent more than 2 decades, right, in London, uh,
Mhm.
working and developing your body of work and career there. And after that, now you have returned to São Paulo, to South America.
Mhm.
And I would like to know what was that experience, and in particular, if you feel your work is changing again through this new encounter, right, in South
Mhm.
America, or if you maintain the relationship with the communities at the same time in England and Brazil. Tell us about that fantastic experience and also the impact in your creation.
Mhm. Yeah, I was in London for 22 years, and I did my postgraduate program there just before I moved back to Brazil. So there's a lot of me that is connected directly to London and to the things there, not just artistically, but as a person. I sort of
Yeah.
became myself and an artist more solidly there. So of course I still um, maintain relationships there, not necessarily work relationships, but friendships and connections. They are important to me. Of course, a lot of them are working working connections. There's a lot of people that I studied with that became very close. We have a very close um, connection through our practice. So there are people that we have studio visits, regularly, even if it's just like showing the camera, but that exchange, of course, is still parts of me, not necessarily of my practice, but then it kind of leaks into that anyway. But of course, the change, had a big effect on the work. Actually, when I moved back to Brazil, I had an exhibition booked already for 6 months after that. So I got here, I found myself a studio and kind of rented that for the time. And I bought some material, I bought some white MDF because that's what I was working with in London. And in my head, I was just like, I'm gonna crack on doing what I was doing. But then I got these boards, I don't remember how many, but I think like 10 boards that were half of MDF boards. There's like 185 by 137.5. And they were the limits to be put inside the lift to get up to the studio. And they were also the size limit for me to be able to manage them around. And I got these large boards, just kind of leaned them against the wall on the side of the studio, and I was in this big studio, I don't know, 5 times bigger than the studio I had in London. And then I started trying to make these things I was making before. They had a different shape and a different, I don't know, vibration, but they were feeling very weird because they weren't moving anything, they weren't bouncing anywhere. You know, they felt a bit kind of contained and kind of twee, I don't know. And then one day, out of I don't know, desperation, I was sitting there. I was like, I'm just going to spread these boards around just so I can see where the walls are. And so I just put the whiteboards around, and then I had this kind of click with the size and the positioning. And I was like, wow, this is something new to me. I never had a space where I could step back enough to deal with this sort of size. And then I had this kind of spark, and I was like, wow, this is exciting. So then I produced this series of works. There were 9 large works. They were all the same orientation, always kind of 185 by 137.5. They all hung a bit lower from the floor than the usual. The first moment when I hung at that height was purely circumstantial because I was by myself and they're quite heavy. So I kind of lifted sideways to see how high I could put, and I put the hooks on, put the board there. And I was like, wow, this is interesting, because when the board is a bit lower and it feels like the visual axis into the pictorial space, or like the workspace, sort of tilted down, to me, it created a depth within the piece. And then these white boards became a space, a void rather than a surface. And then everything kind of, originated from that. And the works were made with like cutting out pieces of it. And then these pieces would be taken out, some paint would be applied on with spray paints, and then put them back on. I guess I'm sort of scared of dealing with them as if they were a painting. So there is this, putting color on, bringing it back in. So there is this sort of thing. Anyway, they were all kind of built around this thing that started with this change. And I produced these works, and they were kind of directly related to this new setup, these new boundaries. And I think, it's always like that. The piece that I submitted for CIFO's appreciation, it is a development of that, but also is a very important piece to me, because it brings a lot of new things that were happening, and kind of, I don't know, there are some works that are more like that to me, when they become almost like an index, a kind of a glossary of things that are coming together, you know, and then they feel almost like a starting, like an epicenter of things to unfold. And I think this work that I submitted to SIFO is very, very much like that. I think it was
Yeah.
a moment when I sort of realized the importance and the height of this, and the weight of these things that are just on the outside of the work, but kind of push the things in a way as to make the work become.
Yes. Mhm. No, Alex, I think it's really important. And also, we are so happy to present your work here at MOLA in our upcoming show in collaboration with SIFO. And the work that you are talking about is the title of the work that we will present here with others, new pieces too, is the work as a space within the possible, right? And
Mhm.
what does it mean for you to present this in with a new audiences here in California, with the recognition of SIFO that you receive an award of grant and commission program when you show them the fantastic work? And tell us about that, a little more about all these moments that you are living now through the recognition, but also with this important, I think, transition in your
Mhm.
creative process, right?
Yeah, no, of course. Um, the the title of the work, the work as a space within the possible, was like the title I gave for the project, for the
Mhm.
kind of the limits, the parameters around it. The work itself is called Beijo, or a flying saucer landing.
Mhm.
Like Beijo because it somehow kind of points to some sort of figuration very loosely, uh, you know, um, but it's something that I saw, and I quite like the idea of it. And then it makes a reference to a song that I like by a band called Magnetic Fields. That there's a line that says, "When we kiss, it's like a flying saucer landing," and I thought was quite poetic and beautiful, and so that became the title. But yeah, the title for the project and this, you know, electing the limits and the parameters, the constraints as part of the work, um, I think is important because it is almost like an exercise in some sort of self generosity, and there's also trying to oppose a systemic idea that development is equated to, you know, pushing through and kind of making it bigger and making it harder. And I think there, of course, we need to push through a lot of things, but we need to elect the things to push through. Just putting yourself in sort of hardships are not necessarily a good way of developing. I think understanding these things and finding a way of expressing from within a certain possibility is a way of resisting to this systemic idea of, you know, growth and development and making them bigger and brighter, and you know, um, but it's this this exhibition is very important to for me, um, to see this thing that kind of talks about this very personal place and practice, to see that being transposed into a different context in a much wider and diverse audience and
Mm.
possibilities of readings and interactions is, I mean, it's great because then you can see how these things resonate outside of a certain um, environment. And I think it's is a way of giving the space for the work to have its own life and kind of survive different ways of relating to it. And I just hope that it is not wide, but I hope it's multifaceted enough to be able to touch people in different places.
Yeah, because I think that in different moments through our conversation, you put the focus in the spectator, right? And I think it's maybe in this intersection that you are working in the artistic practice, but also with the vision and approach of our architect, that you are trying to create a special environment that people can connect directly with your work and maybe discover different questions of layers of information there. I think it's so poetical, and at the same time it's so generous from your side, right? That you are exploring different ideas, but also I think the other people are involved in your thought.
Yeah, I think one analogy that I usually mention when talking about that is that I think in a way I would like people to relate to artworks, not just my work, but like in a kind of more relaxed manner. I think the art world sometimes can present itself so convoluted and mediated by, you know, class, money, dress codes, and other things that get in the way. I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't go to galleries. I don't know anything about art," as if that should be a question. Do you know what I mean? You can listen to classical music. You don't need to be musically trained. You can just kind of expose yourself, and then you widen your perception, your alphabet, and then you start building a more personal relation to things. And I think the art world can be a bit ostracizing in that sense,
Definitely.
which also has something to do with the market, and as if it needs to be said what is being as if things cannot have holes. They need to be tight and understood completely. And I like to think that works could function a bit more like songs.
Yeah, I love that.
To be a bit lighter and not. I think that's why I kind of insist in these materials, these gestures, because I would like them to be a bit more like less, I don't know,
Yeah.
aloof, that they could be a bit closer and a bit lighter. They could be a bit more familiar and less scary, or
Yeah.
mysterious.
No, I love that, and I'm grateful for your position in that way, because it's not too common, and also to have the opportunity to present your work here in dialogue and in a constellation of other artists at the same time will be fantastic. And we are so happy. And thank you,
Thank you.
Alex, for sharing
I
your
can't wait.
thoughts, your different approach and question. I think it's an amazing moment to continue our conversation, and waiting for you here in October, right?
Yeah, I can't wait. No, I'm very excited. I'm very excited, and yeah, no, it's great. It makes
Fantastic.
me really happy, this opportunity and all the conversation, and I don't know, these conversations are very important to me as well. As I said, I need to come upon things for them to kind of become part of the work, and conversations operate in the same way. I need to, I guess that the I don't know, maybe I'm not very clever, but I think I need to go through things and kind of talk and to fully understand. So it's all a kind of process of understanding and learning for me as well. And to have this exchange is very, very important and enriching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, and see you soon. And we will continue because we will have an amazing program through the exhibition here at MOLAA. And again, thank you for your generosity and for sharing with us all your fantastic ideas and your amazing work. Thank you so much.
No, not at all. Thank you. It's a pleasure,
A
honestly.
pleasure.